Greetings! In this video I'll be painting a company veteran from the Cruor Blades Chapter. This chapter was requested by one of you guys. If you have a chapter you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. For this model I've used the helmet from the original Primaris Blood Angels upgrade kit, a custom body, and the pauldron here was embossed and printed. Some information about these bits is in the video description. After assembly I primed the model black, then promptly left it in a drawer for a few months. As the Cruor blades have a mostly steel metallic scheme, I started out with gunmetal grey over most of the model. This paint goes on really smooth and covers well, but I've noticed if you're covering a large area it sometimes needs 2 coats. Now for the black bits, using Black Legion, namely the Imperialis on the torso and the undersuit bits that may get difficult to paint if I did them later. Onto the red bits now, starting with Wordbearer's red. This was applied over the arms, pauldrons, and the head. The first highlight for the red bits was using Tuskgor fur. I wanted to experiment with the darker red recipe, and this colour is similar enough in strength but desaturated, so I figured it could work. This was laid over most exposed sections of the armour, making it a bit of a gradient towards where the light catches it, as well as focusing around the edges of course. Next was Squig orange, applied in smaller areas and along the edges. You may notice that it's starting to look more like flesh than armour, and yeah, I wasn't very happy with it at this point. Wanting to try and stick with the recipe that I planned out, I used some Tower Light Ochre as the final highlight, hoping that it would miraculously fix the scheme, but it just made it look more flesh-like. Onto Mephiston red now, for the blood drop, which is the reason why I needed the dark red for the armour in the first place. But wanting to save the armour, I thinned the Mephiston red and tried to glaze over the fleshy red that I made. I avoided the sharpest highlights and I think it did okay to bring the armour back to a red, though it's not a great recipe to follow. Going back to the blood drop now with some Evil Sunz Scarlet, to truly separate it from the darker red armour. And now onto some Warpstone Glow for the knee pad, signifying 4th company. I also used this paint in the eye lenses and the wrist lights. Moot green followed, highlighting the upper edge of the knee pad and the angle towards the glow of the eye lenses and the wrist lights. Dorn yellow was last, doing a smaller section for the eyes and the wrist lights. Note that I stopped painting the gem. I decided against green for that bit. I briefly went back to Moot green to make the yellow on the eyes a bit smaller, just to clean it up a bit. For the weapon casing I used some Eshin grey as the base coat, followed by Mechanicus standard grey for an edge highlight and general chipping and scratching pass. Imperialis on the torso also received some highlights over the raised bits. I applied some gloss varnish to the right pauldron in preparation for decals, and then switched to some Rhinox hide to base coat the leather details. Zandri dust was next, base coating in the tab art. Both this and the brown required 2 coats to get full coverage. Now to start highlighting these two details, starting with Mournfang brown for the holster. I applied it along the edges and then created some wavy patterns with vertical lines. A few passes of this makes a nice gradient that implies depth. Ushabti bone was next for the tabard. I applied this on the surfaces that I felt were facing the light, and not just the edges that were further from the recesses, if that makes sense. This way the shadows are more pronounced, and instead of it getting darker the further in they are. Steel Legion Drab was next, used to do the final pass on the leather. This went over the highest points in the fake depth that I painted, as well as adding some scratches to weather it up a bit. Finally, Screaming Skull was used to emphasise the previous highlights of the cloth, as well as applying some thin lines to imitate the texture of the material itself. Now onto some Retributor armour for the various gold details around the model. There's a few of these little bits, and I did 2 coats to get complete coverage. At this stage I switched back to Black Legion to clean up the black details, and I also went in and redid the gem on the helmet. I painted it black and then used some Evil Sunz Scarlet around the edge. The Blood Angels video that I did recently shows this better. I also applied the decals at this stage, the skull signifying the command squad and a little blood drop as an honour. I wanted the bionic arm to look different from the metallic armour, so I used an exhaust manifold. This paint has a slight brown colour to it, though it's not super noticeable on camera, especially under these lights. Now to highlight all the various spots on the metallic armour, using Duraluminium. The edges were obvious spots, but I also applied some highlights over the raised panels to get a nice shine, and added some small scratches around the place, though that's not very easy with metallics for some reason. I did a quick paint job for the lamp using Ulthuan Grey, then covering it with Bad Moon's Yellow. I then brought out the black enamel panel liner to do a wash over most of the model. This shades the metallic armour nicely, filling in the panel lines, but also works over the red armour to add some grime and, again, emphasise the panel lines. I did avoid the cloth, though I allowed it to do a recessed shade where it connected with other details, like the chains. The main thing about avoiding it is that I've already done some fake shadows, and adding a wash would just fill the recesses instead of where I painted the shadows. After I was happy with the enamel and it had some time to dry, I applied my usual basing method, painted the base rim black, and then sealed everything in with some ultramatte varnish. And here we have it! A Command Squad veteran from the Cruor Blades Chapter. I'm very pleased with how this one came out by the end, though the trouble with the red wasn't very fun. I want to try different recipes out, so I'm not doing the same thing every time, and sometimes it just doesn't go as well, but at least I managed to recover it. The end result looks good, but replicating it would be something I wouldn't want to do. Beyond the red, I think the silver came out nicely, and the green on the knee adds a nice flare of colour. I'm not super happy with the lamp. It was an afterthought that I'd rushed, but I'm not sure how I'd do those beyond some fairly strong lighting effects, which I think would take too much focus away from other details if I'd done that. But anyway, if you have any chapter requests, let me know in the comments. Any questions too, or what you'd do differently. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed this one, and that you stick around for the next one.